Hello everybody, welcome to Red Tool House. On our YouTube channel, we talk about all things homesteading and try to implement some of those things in our rural 100 acres in southern West Virginia. Well, as promised, today's video kind of ties in a little bit with Wednesday's video. We're going to talk about how to set and get the best pricing on your homestead products. For many of us aspiring homesteaders, we'd love to not be tied down with a 9-to-5 job 5 to 6 days a week. Instead, we'd rather be at home working on our homestead. To help to achieve that goal, obviously we still need income because modern homesteading requires income to pay taxes and utility bills and blah, 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 all that type of stuff, or just technology investments. So many of us look and say, well, what can I do on my homestead to produce revenue? And a lot go with making crafts, foodstuffs, whether it's fruits or vegetables or finished products, meats obviously, woodworking, furniture, metalsmithing, custom knives, all those type of things. There's all kinds of things that people do on their homestead to produce income so they can either quit the 9-to-5 job or at least not be as married to it as they sometimes need to be. Well, a common question I see all the time that pops up on homesteading Facebook groups, different forums I look at, and then even some questions that we get here at Red Tool House is, how do I set my price for the products I either produce or grow on my homestead to sell? What's the best way to set the price? And unfortunately, answers I see pop up a lot of times are, well, here's what I charge for my same XYZ, you should charge that, or I just charge whatever price you think is right, what you'd like to get out of it, and set that, and that should be good. Well, while this isn't necessarily a wrong thing to do, it's just you don't want to base your homestead business around just answers that come from that. Granted, it's good to know what other people are doing if they're selling similar products in your area or other areas. And it also is beneficial to set a price that you feel is profitable. That, hey, if I'm going to do this, I want to at least get X out of it. So there's value in that. The problem is, this is not where you just start and take off and kick off your homestead business or really invest a lot of time and effort into your homestead business if you haven't done a little bit more research and due diligence when it comes to setting the prices of your products. Okay, real quick, not to toot a horn, but a lot of new people to the channel here in the past couple months, so where am I coming from? I have 20 years of marketing experience. I've owned my own marketing company for 12 years now. And I see a lot of these questions constantly. We do a lot of consulting with small businesses and startup businesses, so we find this question pop up a lot. So what I want to share is just from those experiences. So when we consult with a small business or a startup business and the price of their product becomes an issue, we start to do a product price analysis. Well, the first thing we want to do in doing a price assessment is we want to do a cost analysis. So we need to identify all the costs involved in producing that product. So that would incorporate, obviously, the cost of goods to produce that product, all the material that goes into it, the overhead expenses that go into that, the equipment, machinery, all those type of things if that's needed. Labor, of course, if you're hiring labor or if it's you yourself doing the work. Taxes, of course, you want to factor in taxes. Most of us have to pay taxes on this stuff, whether it's taxes on income, taxes on inventory, taxes for labor, all those things come into play. So you take those key areas, and there's some other things depending on your industry that we need to look at as well. But you get that cost number established and say, what is my cost per piece of item? So if you put all that together and say, well, it costs me 25 cents to produce one of these items. You take that number and that's a cost starting point. Well, once we've established cost, then we want to look at the percentage of markup we would like to achieve. Now, industries can go all over the place. Some industries get really high markup, some get very tight margins or very low markup. And you may think, well, obviously anybody you ask for is going to say, well, I want the maximum, I want to shoot for the moon. And yes, that's what people would say, but obviously there's some common sense that has to dictate there. And of course, you have to look at competition and other factors. So picking a logical markup percentage is a good place to start, and then that can be adjusted as you move forward. So with markup, you look at it as a percentage. So again, if we're looking at something that costs $1 to produce, and you say, well, I want 100% markup, that means you're going to double the price. you're going to make that $1 item a $2 item. And you just keep moving on from there. So you maybe think, wait a minute, 100% markup, doubling your price, and that's a starting point. Gracious, Troy, are you one of those greedy capitalists that just keep running numbers up and just markup, markup, markup? I am a capitalist, but I don't necessarily say I'm a greedy capitalist. And just hear me out on this before you start typing negative comments about how I'm the monopoly guy trying to make all this money. When you look at your markup, that difference, that what's called profit margin, the margin between your retail price, what you've marked it up, and your cost, isn't pure profit at that point. So things like marketing, promotion, spokespeople, research and development, all of that comes into play. You think about, why does a disposable razor cost $20 a piece? Well, because they're usually paying for the spokesperson more so than they're paying actually for the development and cost of producing that disposable razor. Now granted, your Homestead product, you're probably not going to be going out and hiring a spokesperson anytime soon, and your R&D may be you in the garage or in the kitchen coming up with new batches of recipes or new styles of doing something, so probably not going to have a lot of expense in R&D either, but that's just something to consider. So now that you've got your percentage of markup set, you know what your cost is, you know what you'd like to sell it for, your retail price. Once you have that set, before you take off running, we also want to look at what we call, what can the market bear? So by that we mean look at the business climate around your product and service. Is your product and service strictly regional? Like in our situation, when we sell pastured pork, we don't sell pastured pork outside of a logical geographic circle around our farm. I'm not shipping pork to California or Florida or whatever. That's not what we do. So I look at my market in that area. I don't necessarily have to look at national market and see how people are doing it nationally, because my market is unique to itself, just like those markets are unique. So when I say what can the market bear, I'm looking at that area around where I'm going to sell my pork. Now, if I was selling something online, maybe I'd produced a widget that anybody can buy across the world, then of course I have to then take into consideration what the larger market looks like. What can the larger market bear when it comes to pricing this product? So elements you look at when you see what can the market bear is, of course, you look at product evaluation in comparison to competitors, supply and demand, and any product uniqueness you may have or your competition has. So let's look at this example. Let's say there's 20 other competitors in your market area that are producing a similar product for much, much less than what your markup price has been set. So you've done your cost analysis, you've done your markup percentage. I'm going to sell things for XYZ, maybe let's say it's $5. I'm selling this for $5 a piece, and you discover there's 20 companies around you that are selling that exact same thing for $3 a piece. While price isn't the end-all be-all, not everybody buys things exclusively on price, and I'll stick a pin in that comment because we'll come back to that later. You still have to look and say, well, this could be a pretty big mountain, a big hurdle to overcome if I'm selling a $5 product and everyone else is selling the same thing at $3. Doesn't mean you give up and throw in the towel. It just means it's going to be a little tougher to get the sales that you need. So you may end up having to adjust your markup percentage there, or be more creative in your marketing. Now on the flip side of that, when looking at what the market can bear, you may find that nobody around me is producing this product, or my product's so unique that there's really nothing out there. I have one client that has an invention, so he invented a product. There's really nothing out there like that. So for the past 10 years, we've been working with him, and he's really been doing great because there's just nothing out there like it. So it's been able to allow him to set his price where he can really grow and expand and reinvest in his company. So you may discover, okay, I don't have any competition around here, so my markup price, the market can actually bear a little bit more than that because there's a lot of demand. People are wanting my product, and if you discover, well, I'm selling out of this constantly, I need to bump that price up. And I'll give you a logical example, again, with our situation with our pastured pork. We sell, everybody loves bacon. Almost everybody loves bacon. Had one guy actually complain that he absolutely hates bacon. Don't know that I trust a guy that doesn't like bacon. Anyway, so we always sell out of our bacon as individual cuts, usually within 2 months. It goes very fast. And the first year I started, I sold my bacon, I think, for $7.50 a pound. That to me was where I wanted to be markup wise. Well, it went so fast that I discovered, hey, I think the market can bear a little bit more price. So the next year, I went to $8. Next year, I went to $8.50. So that's where I am right now at $8.50 a pound per bacon, and I'm still selling out in 2 months. So in theory, I could take that up even higher. What will the market bear? At some point, I'll start to get pushback. I'll reach the ceiling, and maybe my sales start to slow down. But at that point, obviously, I can always discount. I can do specials. I can do packages to put some more value added, a nice little marketing term that people use all the time, a little value added to that, so I can still continue to push that product. So there may be times you identify, hey, my percentage of markup is actually low. I can go a little bit higher because the market will bear a higher price. Okay, I hope I haven't lost everybody because I'm using marketing speak, but bear with me and we'll get into practical examples now pertaining to homesteading. So the first example that I want to use, and it's the most obvious for us, is chickens. See behind me I've got Cam's egg layers. These are just his small flock. Our main flock is down over the hill. So when it comes to chicken eggs and selling chicken eggs, you may say, well, how in the world can anybody make a profit selling chicken eggs? And we actually do, and you may not believe me, but we actually do make a profit. Now, it's taken a long time to recognize that profit because of our upfront infrastructure costs and investments in materials like you see behind me. It took us a while to get to where we actually had profit, and it required volume. So we had to do a lot of chicken eggs to be able to turn a profit. But this will be a good example to look at, very practical. So the first thing I had to do in setting up my business to sell chicken eggs, of course, was to do my cost analysis. What is my cost? And I won't get into the gory details in this video of how I broke all of that down. I'm actually going to save that for another video that I'm going to call How to Make a Profit Selling Chicken Eggs. So look for that. We'll get into that some other time. But for the sake of time, I don't want to ramble on too long. I discovered that my cost per dozen of chicken eggs was $1.25. So in analyzing that cost, I said, well, I'd really like to have a 300% markup. Well, a 300% markup was going to make that about $3.75 a dozen. So when I looked to see what would the market bear in my area, I was a little nervous because I saw at the feed store I go to all the time that there was a little sign on the little bulletin board there that said farm fresh eggs, $1.25 a dozen. Have seen some neighbors in the closer to me where they've got little signs out, hey, we're selling farm fresh eggs for $2 a dozen or $3 a dozen. I thought, okay, I may not be able to get that markup percentage that I want. I also then discovered the state regulations or recommendations. They call them recommendations. I call them regulations. Their regulations detail how you need to package your eggs for resale. So you can't just take a carton and reuse it. If you do that, you have to mark certain things out, you have to scratch things out, you have to add additional information. I thought, well, that's going to look pretty crappy taking some other farm's egg carton, scratching certain things out, and just handing it off to the customer. I mean, can we look any more Bush League there? So I thought, well, I need to invest in my own cartons. Well, that's going to obviously add to my cost when already my markup percentage looks a little iffy. So I decided to go ahead and make the investment in having my branded cartons, and then I reduced my markup down to $3.50 per dozen. So it went down, I think it was about 280% markup. So going with $3.50 a dozen. And then, so I have my branded egg cartons. There's two components that make up this carton. The carton, of course, which I buy in bulk, so I do have an outlay of cash in big chunks, so I buy in bulk to drive the price down. That's what we call economy of scale. And then, of course, the branded label, and this is actually just a very small, thin printed piece of marketing material that we use actually spray adhesive glue to manually put those on there. So that's something that's fun to have teenagers do. That's why we like having teenagers. So I have this branded carton that my total cost for the carton is 48 cents. It's, I believe it's 32 cents for the carton, and I think I've got 16 cents in the individual printed piece here. So that takes you up to 48 cents. So what I decided to do was I'm going to sell my eggs for $4 a dozen. So I could pick up this cost of this carton, but I encourage my customers, if they return a carton to me when it's empty, of course, and it's in good shape, it doesn't look like somebody murdered somebody in it and they're not torn all to pieces, if they return it back in good shape, then I give them a 50-cent discount on their next dozen order of eggs. But that's the concept there, that if you give me my carton back in good shape, I'm going to give you a 50-cent discount on your next dozen. So they discover, well, I'm really only paying $3.50 for a dozen eggs as long as I return the carton, and of course, hopefully it gets a repeat customer. They know they've got an incentive out there. Keep in mind, when you're setting that markup percentage, not only do you have the cost of packaging and marketing and those type of things, but you want to make sure you leave some room there in case you want to add specials or discounts or offer coupon codes. You don't want that cutting into your profit margin, and you definitely don't want it getting below cost. Nobody wants to be in business to lose money. So that extra buffer can allow you to say, well, let's say you've got a perishable good, maybe you're producing food, or like in our situation with pork and eggs, they can't lay around forever. Say, wow, I need to get motivated, I need to get moving because I've got some stuff that's approaching an expiration date, so I'm going to start dropping that price. We're going to start doing percentage discounts. We're going to do some other value-added kitting there to make sure we can get that moving. So that's why you want to have a little bit higher margin so you can move there a little bit with discounts and sales. So that's how I set my price on my egg product. So if on your homestead you're producing food, food consumables, dry goods, you're producing apparel, you're producing furniture, woodworking, metalsmithing, whatever the case may be, you can do that exact same cost analysis and figure out where you should be. So that takes care of the first leg of our video discussion, how do I set my price? But the next leg is even just as important, if not more important. How do I make sure I get the best price for my product? How do I make sure that I get that markup that I set? Okay, so you get your price set, but what if you discover that you're one of 100 or one of 1,000 people out there selling the exact same thing? What do you do to get people to buy your product? How do you get your product to rise above the noise of all your competition out there? So remember when I said earlier, price isn't everything? Not everybody purchases products or services based upon price. If that was the case, then the Yugo car manufacturers would still be cranking out really crappy cars. So let's use an example I think almost every homesteader can relate to get this really practical. Let's say you decide you want to make homemade soap. I don't think you can swing a cat around by the tail and not hit a homesteader that's making soap and trying to turn it into a business. If all homesteaders or handmade soap makers price their soap based upon solely the lowest price, then eventually everyone would work themselves out of business because everyone would keep fighting one another for the lowest price, and we as consumers would be buying soap a dime a dozen. That's obviously not happening right now. Well, the reason why soap makers can still get $6 and up per 5-ounce bar of soap is they've managed to differentiate their product from their competitors. And this differentiation could simply be, well, it lasts longer, it smells good, maybe it doesn't smell at all, it's good for your skin, it's hypoallergenic, it's hyperallergenic, it's all natural, it's somewhat all natural. They've looked for traits, they've looked for things, and have been able to push characteristics of their product to get people's attention. The key is they've managed to convince the buyer that comparing their product to a cheaper product is not an apples to apples comparison. So think about that. If you discover, well, there's a handmade bar of soap that's $2 for a 5-ounce bar and you're selling yours for $6, why is anybody buying that? Well, I as the soap maker have convinced my buyers that my $6 bar is worth it. It's not an apples to apples comparison. My product somehow is superior to the $2 product. So do business owners take advantage of that opportunity? Yes. There's a lot of unscrupulous activity out there where it says, well, my product's better because of X, Y, Z, and that may not be the case. There may be zero truth in that. And I don't encourage you to do that. Yes, you could lie and you could say, well, it has this, this, and this. It's, comes from the tears of virgin unicorns, and that's why it's so good. Those type of lies, obviously that lie would, but lies like that are going to catch up with you in the long run. People are going to see through the charade of your marketing and say, wait a minute, this isn't true. This is wrong, or this guy's a total idiot. So that's where this kind of blows back up in your face. And I've seen time after time where people do that. Correcting those mistakes come back on you fourfold, and it costs you more to overcome that than if you're just stuck with the truth from the beginning. So I don't encourage you to make stuff up about your product. Look for things that are genuine. So regardless of what your product is, whether it's soap, whether it's pork, whether it's chicken eggs or furniture, or whatever the case may be, explore your product. Take a good hard look at it, or even invite some friends or people that you trust to give you honest answers, to look at your product and say, okay, what is it about what I make that is unique, that you find it appealing, or maybe it's not as appealing that I can improve on. But look at how it's made. Is it all handmade, or no, it used a lot of machinery stuff, or it used a lot of components that I just buy from a Chinese source? That comes into play. What type of material is being used? Am I using just the cheapest ingredients I can find, or am I using high-end ingredients? I'm taking this time to invest in better ingredients, so it's costing me more. It should validate a higher price. Are you putting more labor into it? Does it require a skill to be able to produce that? You may discover, hey, I'm getting to the point where I'm becoming an artisan or a craftsman or a tradesman in what I'm doing here, so that should go a long way. I have years of experience in doing this. So look at all those opportunities. You can see that just because of experience and how you put something together, you may be able to make your product outshine the others and still obviously be very truthful in the situation. I'll give an example, again, another example here at Red Tool House. Back in the day, I was really into woodworking, still am, but not producing nearly as much stuff as I used to. But for my mom's 60th birthday, I made this steamer trunk for her, and it was a labor of love. I put a lot of work into that steamer trunk, and she absolutely loved it. I was very excited about it. I was very proud of it. I'd never built something with that much detail. But as I started sharing this online and through my website, people are like, oh, that's beautiful. I want that. Can you make one for me? And I'm like, well, yeah, I could make that again, but there's a lot of work in that. And most people are like, oh, okay, yeah, I probably can't afford that, or I can't justify that. Well, I had one guy say, yes, how much? And I said, $600. The guy's like, okay. So you may think, wow, man, you really stuck it to that guy selling that steamer truck for $600. But as I was talking to him about it, he said, well, okay, what am I getting for my $600? I made sure that he understood that this steamer trunk was a custom build. It had over $100 of hardware on it alone: the corners, the straps, the lock, the latches, the hinges, the safety mechanisms to keep the lid from slamming down. It had over $100 just in hardware there. I used all hardwoods that came from my property. So we used oak, there was walnut, there was cherry. That was all used in building that. There wasn't a single bit of plywood. The panels and everything were made from hardwood. And inside the steamer trunk was a little serving tray. And that serving tray was made out of solid wood, but it had a book-matched bottom in it. So the base of the tray was book-matched cherry. And that tray was finished with what's called a French polish. A lot of time in that process. So there was a lot of work. There was a lot of labor I put into that. So I could easily explain to that customer to say, hey, yeah, this is a $600 steamer trunk, but you're not going to find another one like it. And hopefully, if I did my job well, I built it to the level that you would expect. But it had a lot of expense. It had a lot of product cost into it. So let's say you've done this, you've explored your product, and you say, well, Troy, I really can't find enough uniqueness. What I make is just the same as everybody else. Well, that's going to make it a little tougher, but also look at that opportunity and say, well, what can I do? Is there something I can tweak? If you're making soap, do you say, well, I'm going to start squeezing butterfly juice into my soaps, and that's going to make it that much better? You obviously may want to research that before you start squeezing butterflies, but you get what I'm saying. Look to see, is there something I can do to tweak? Is there something that people aren't doing? Or to say, well, I'm going to start putting lavender oil in my soap, and I'm going to grow my own lavender, and it's going to be organic, and it's going to be a cultivar of lavender. Whatever the case may be. I know nothing about lavender, but that would be an example there, and you're going to have to tout that. You're going to have to market that this is why this is expensive. It has this special cultivar of lavender in it. So look at that and see, is there adjustments you can make? Maybe you're not throwing the product completely out and starting from scratch. Maybe you're just simply making some minor adjustments there to make that more marketable. Well, another thing to consider to get the best price for your homestead product is consider your brand and consider your packaging. People are generally less apprehensive to spend more money on a product when it's packaged and presented in a professional manner. Now that may sound a little snooty, but I know you all can think of all kinds of examples where you would agree with that. And quite frankly, even here at Red Tool House, would you want to buy, if you were at the farmer's market, which I don't sell at farmer's markets, but if you came up to my table and I just had an egg carton like that, where you can see the label's been torn off of it and it's just a plain Jane egg carton, and say, hey, buy my eggs, here we go, they're $4 a dozen or $3.50 a dozen, maybe that's not as appealing. But if you saw something here that was branded and say, oh wow, okay, this guy's got a nice little logo brand, he's got a little sexy design, yada yada, maybe more apt to buy a $4 dozen of eggs just because of the branding there. Now that may rub some of you all the wrong way. Again, that's marketing. Unfortunately, that's just the way people look at it. You think about the old don't judge a book by its cover. Yes, we're not supposed to do that, but why are books still manufactured with very sexy covers? Because people are still judging books by their covers. Moving on. And one last point to guarantee you get the best price for your Homestead product is, remember, you're not just selling a product, you're actually selling yourself to some degree. No, I'm not talking about selling yourself, but you are representing your product. If you are unprofessional, if you are hateful, if you walk around with a frown on your face, or you're Mr. Raincloud, then you're just not going to have the right attitude to convince somebody to spend their hard-earned money on your product or service. So be an extension of your product, or let your product be an extension of you. If you're happy, upbeat, you're outgoing, you want to talk to people and say, hey, come check out my product. This is really cool. I think you'd like this. Then that's going to go further. If you're not that kind of personality, then it doesn't mean you got to throw in the towel. You just got to work on other ways of delivering that. If you're introverted and you can't be that boisterous to people face to face, maybe that's where you say, well, here's my wife or my husband or my friend. They're going to explain this to you. Or, hey, I've put together a little video. If you want to check out our website or check out my social media, you can see a video where I explain all this. And maybe that gives you the opportunity to relax a little bit. But if you're in sales, you got to play the game. You got to learn how to be outgoing, talk to people, reach out to people, and again, convince them that I'm a likable guy, daggone it, you should buy my product. I wouldn't be a proper capitalist if I didn't say, along the lines of products, if you go to redtoolhouse.com, you can see our store where we sell hats, like the one I'm wearing, and we still have some t-shirts in stock, like the one I'm wearing. And then also, if you go to Amazon, we have our test merchant account that we're playing with, where you can get our Red Tool House, our traditional Red Tool House logo branded shirt, and our pastured pork shirt. So be sure to check that out. I'll put links below. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet, be sure to do so. That way you'll get notifications of our new videos. And be sure to check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Red Tool House Farm. All right, take care, everybody.